He who permits himself to be insulted deserves to be. We've all been there. That moment when disrespect lands like a slap you didn't see coming. Your heart races. Your mind scrambles. And you freeze, with no idea how to respond with both strength and dignity. Here's what most people don't understand. Disrespect isn't just about what someone said. It's about what happens inside your nervous system in the seconds that follow. The threat detection, the emotional flooding, the cognitive shutdown that hijacks your ability to respond with clarity. Today, we're exploring 50 psychology-backed techniques that will fundamentally change how you navigate disrespect. These aren't clever comebacks or witty retorts. They're precise interventions, from regulating your autonomic nervous system in real time to setting boundaries that actually hold, from understanding hostile attribution bias to knowing exactly when to walk away. Before we begin, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Let's see how global this community is. Let's begin. Trick 1. Polyvagal state recognition. Your autonomic nervous system has 3 distinct modes, 3 different ways of responding to threat. Dr. Stephen Porges spent decades mapping these states, and his polyvagal theory reveals something crucial. Not all distress feels the same, and not all distress requires the same intervention. When someone disrespects you, your body makes a split-second assessment. Is this something I can fight? Is this something I need to flee? Or is this so overwhelming that my only option is to shut down completely? The first state is sympathetic activation. This is the one most people recognize. Your heart races. Your muscles tense. You feel heat rising in your face. Energy floods your system. This is your body preparing for action, fight or flight. You might feel the urge to snap back, to defend yourself, to say something cutting. Your hands might clench. Your jaw might tighten. This is mobilization. The second state is dorsal vagal shutdown. This one is quieter, and for that reason, more insidious. You don't feel anger. You feel nothing. Or rather, you feel distant, foggy, disconnected. Your body has assessed the threat as insurmountable, so it's doing the only thing left, conserving energy, numbing you, pulling you inward. You might feel frozen. You might struggle to find words. Everything slows down. This is a mobilization. The third state is ventral vagal engagement. This is your optimal state, the one where you feel safe enough to connect, to think clearly, to communicate effectively. When you're in this state, you can handle disrespect with grace because your nervous system isn't screaming danger at you. Here's why recognition matters. If you're in sympathetic activation, you need to discharge that energy. If you're in dorsal shutdown, you need to gently mobilize. And if you're lucky enough to be in ventral engagement, you can respond with clarity. The technique is simple. The moment you feel your body responding to disrespect, pause. Do a quick internal scan. Ask yourself, is my heart racing? That's sympathetic. Am I feeling numb or disconnected? That's dorsal. Can I still think clearly and feel present? That's ventral. You can't skip this step. Because if you're in sympathetic overdrive and you try to have a calm conversation, you'll fail. If you're in dorsal shutdown and you try to assert a boundary, the words won't come. Know your state first. Then choose your intervention. Quick pause here before we proceed further. If this type of valuable content is your thing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps. Now let's proceed further. Trick 2. Physiological sigh technique. Now that you know which state you're in, here's the fastest way to reset your nervous system. It's not meditation. It's not counting to 10. It's something far more mechanical, far more reliable. UCLA researchers discovered that a specific breathing pattern, 2 inhales followed by an extended exhale, can downregulate stress faster than any other technique. They call it the physiological sigh, and it works because of simple respiratory mechanics. When you're stressed, carbon dioxide builds up in your bloodstream. This signals your brainstem that something is wrong, which perpetuates the stress response. The double inhale does something clever. The first inhale fills your lungs. The second inhale pops open any collapsed air sacs, and the long exhale purges that excess CO2. You're not trying to calm your mind. You're changing your blood chemistry. And when your blood chemistry changes, your brainstem receives a new message. We're safe. Here's how you do it. Breathe in through your nose, a full breath. Then, before exhaling, take a second, shorter inhale, like a little sip of air. Now exhale slowly through your mouth, as long as you can make it. That's it. One cycle. Maybe 2 or 3 if the encounter was particularly intense. This isn't about achieving some transcendent state of peace. This is about mechanically resetting your system so that you can think clearly enough to decide what to do next. Use this during the disrespectful interaction if you can, or immediately after. Your body will respond within seconds. You'll feel the shift, a loosening in your chest, a slight slowing of your heart rate, the return of your capacity to think. Trick 3. Cold exposure microdosing. Sometimes the emotional intensity is so strong that breathing techniques aren't enough. You need something that interrupts the cascade more forcefully. This is where the mammalian dive reflex becomes your ally. When cold water touches your face, your body triggers an ancient survival mechanism. Your heart rate slows. Your parasympathetic nervous system overrides the sympathetic system. It's not a voluntary response. It's hardwired, probably left over from when our ancestors needed to dive for food or escape predators through water. The beauty of this mechanism is its simplicity. You cannot sustain a rage response while the dive reflex is activated. It's physiologically impossible. You don't need an ice bath. You don't need to plan ahead. You need cold water, and you need it on your face, particularly around your eyes and upper cheeks where the trigeminal nerve sits. If you're at home, splash cold water on your face. If you're in an office, wet a paper towel with cold water and press it against the back of your neck or hold it to your forehead. If you carry a water bottle, press it against your wrists or inner arms where the skin is thin and the temperature change registers quickly. If you're somewhere with ice, hold a cube in your hand and squeeze. The mechanism is physical, not psychological. The cold signals your brainstem, prioritize survival. And survival, in this moment, means calming down. Use this when your emotional intensity exceeds your cognitive control capacity. When you can feel yourself about to say something you'll regret. When the anger is so hot that you can't access reason. The cold will bring you back. Trick 4. Bilateral stimulation grounding. After the encounter, after you've removed yourself from the situation, there's often a secondary problem. You can't stop replaying it. The loop begins. What they said. What you should have said. What you'll say next time. Round and round. The amygdala locked in hyperactivation, refusing to let go. This is where bilateral stimulation becomes essential. The technique comes from EMDR therapy, developed originally for trauma processing, but its application extends to any moment when your brain is stuck in a threat loop. The principle is this: alternating left-right sensory input engages both hemispheres of your brain in integrative processing. This reduces amygdala hyperactivation and interrupts the rumination cycle. You're essentially giving your brain something else to focus on, something rhythmic, predictable, and safe. The simplest method is alternate knee tapping. Sit down. Place your hands on your knees. Tap your left knee, then your right knee, then left, then right. Slow, steady, rhythmic. Keep going for a minute or two. Your eyes might want to close. Let them. If you're standing or need something more subtle, try the butterfly hug. Cross your arms over your chest, each hand resting on the opposite shoulder. Tap your shoulders alternately, left, right, or walk. Walking is naturally bilateral. Pay attention to the sensation of your feet hitting the ground. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Let that rhythm become your focus. What you're doing is creating a somatic anchor. Your nervous system begins to synchronize with the rhythm. The repetitive, bilateral stimulation tells your brain, we're processing, we're integrating, we can move through this. Use this after the encounter. Use it before you respond to an email or text. Use it when you wake at 3 a.m. still thinking about what happened. It won't erase what occurred, but it will free you from the endless replay. Trick 5. Proprioceptive Reset Protocol. Here's something most people don't understand about the stress response. Your body prepared for physical action. When your sympathetic nervous system activated, it flooded you with cortisol and adrenaline. Your muscles tensed. Your heart pumped harder. Your body got ready to fight or run. But you did neither. You sat in that meeting. You stood in that conversation. You absorbed the disrespect and did nothing physical. Now you're left with all that energy, all that arousal, with nowhere to go. And unused energy doesn't just dissipate. It turns into anxiety. It turns into rumination. It keeps you wired, restless, unable to settle. The solution is proprioceptive reset, deliberately engaging your muscles in heavy work to complete the stress cycle your body started. The principle is simple. Discharge the energy through the same system that generated it. Push against a wall with maximum force for 10 seconds. Not casually. As hard as you can, as if you're trying to move the wall. Feel every muscle in your arms, chest, and core engage. Hold it, then release. Or squeeze a tennis ball in your hand until your forearm burns. Hold it until you can't hold it anymore. Then release. Or if you're at a standing desk, place both palms flat on the desk and push down with all your strength for 10 seconds. What you're doing is giving your body the physical completion it was preparing for. The tension discharges. The energy moves through and out. And afterward, you'll notice something. The restless, wired feeling diminishes. Your body recognizes that the threat response has completed its cycle. Use this when you feel that jittery, can't settle sensation after a disrespectful encounter. Don't try to meditate it away or think your way out of it. Move the energy through your body first. Then you'll have access to the calmer, clearer state you need. Trick 6. Vagal tone strengthening through vocalization. Everything we've discussed so far is reactive, techniques to use when disrespect has already occurred. But there's a proactive intervention that strengthens your baseline capacity to handle social threat. And it involves something you probably do without thinking, using your voice. The vagus nerve is the primary pathway of your parasympathetic nervous system. It runs from your brainstem down through your throat, heart, and digestive system. One of its many functions is innervating the muscles of your larynx, your voice box. Here's the fascinating part. The relationship is bidirectional. The vagus nerve affects your voice, but your voice also affects your vagal tone. Specific vocal exercises can strengthen your vagal brake, your body's capacity to regulate stress and return to calm. Humming is one of the most effective. The vibration stimulates the vagus nerve directly. Long, slow humming, where you feel the resonance in your chest and throat, increases vagal tone over time. Or try the VU sound. Inhale deeply, then on a long exhale, make a low VU sound, like the beginning of the word food. Let it vibrate. Feel it in your chest. Gargling works similarly. The muscles you engage, the stimulation at the back of your throat, all of it activates vagal pathways. Singing, especially loud singing, provides the same benefit. It doesn't matter if you're good. It matters that you're engaging those muscles, that you're creating vibration, that you're stimulating the nerve. This isn't a technique for the moment of disrespect. This is daily practice. 5 minutes of humming while you make coffee, singing in your car, gargling during your evening routine. Over weeks and months, you're building a more resilient nervous system, one that doesn't spiral as quickly, that recovers faster, that has a stronger baseline capacity for regulation. When disrespect comes, and it will, you'll notice the difference. Your reaction won't be as intense. Your recovery will be faster. You've strengthened the biological infrastructure that makes everything else possible. Trick 7. Orienting response restoration. Immediately after removing yourself from a disrespectful situation, your threat response is still active. Your attention is still narrowed, still focused on the danger. This is how attention works under threat. It tunnels. You lose awareness of your surroundings. Everything except the threat fades away. Peter Levine, who developed somatic experiencing, identified a crucial intervention, deliberately restoring the orienting response. This is the natural behavior animals display after escaping danger. They look around. They scan their environment. They signal to their nervous system that the threat has passed. You need to do the same. Slowly look around the room. Don't rush this. Notice colors. Name them silently. Blue chair, gray wall, green plant. Notice textures. Smooth desk, rough carpet, soft fabric. Notice objects. Lamp, book, window, cup. What you're doing is bringing your attention out of the narrow threat focus and back into broad environmental awareness. You're telling your ventral vagal system, it's safe to engage with the world again. Your nervous system needs evidence of safety, and that evidence comes through your senses. When you deliberately notice your surroundings, when you observe that you are, in fact, in a safe space, your body begins to stand down. This technique works best when you've physically removed yourself from the situation. Find a quiet place, a bathroom, an empty office, your car, a corner of a cafe. Then do the scan. Slowly, thoroughly. Let your visual attention move from object to object. Let yourself notice the ordinary, mundane details of the physical world. You might feel your breathing slow. You might feel your shoulders drop. These are signs that your nervous system is shifting from threat detection back to social engagement mode. Trick 8. Temporal distancing through chronesthesia. When you're stuck in the emotional intensity, when everything feels enormous and consuming, there's a cognitive technique that leverages one of your brain's most sophisticated capacities: mental time travel. Chronesthesia is your ability to project yourself into the past or future, to imagine yourself at different points in time. And this capacity, it turns out, is remarkably effective at reducing amygdala reactivity. The technique is simple. Ask yourself, how will I view this moment 1 year from today? Not tomorrow. Not next week. 1 year. What happens when you ask this question is fascinating. You activate your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for perspective taking and long-term thinking. This engagement reduces the amygdala's reactivity. The threat feels less immediate, less overwhelming. You're not denying what happened. You're not minimizing it. You're simply placing it within a broader temporal context. And from that future perspective, with a year of living behind you, the moment often looks different, smaller, more manageable, sometimes even instructive. This is your psychological immune system at work. Given time, you adapt. You integrate. You move forward. The future version of you, looking back, has already done that work. Borrowing their perspective gives you access to their calm. Use this when you feel stuck in the intensity, when the hurt feels like it will never fade, when you can't imagine feeling normal again. Ask the question. Let yourself imagine that future self. Notice what shifts. Trick 9. Fundamental attribution error correction. Here's something your mind does automatically, without asking permission. When someone treats you badly, you assume it reveals their character. They're rude. They're cruel. They're a disrespectful person. This is who they are. But when you treat someone badly, you have a completely different explanation. You were stressed. You were tired. You were dealing with something else. The situation made you act that way. This is called the fundamental attribution error, and it's one of the most robust findings in social psychology. We attribute other people's behavior to their disposition, their character, their personality, their nature. We attribute our own behavior to our situation, our circumstances, our context, our environment. The reason this matters when you've been disrespected is simple. Most of the time, their behavior stems from something you cannot see, stress you don't know about, pain they haven't shared, context that's invisible to you, not malicious character, not calculated cruelty. Situation. This doesn't excuse the behavior. It doesn't mean you have to accept it, but it changes how you hold it. When you find yourself creating narratives about who they are, when you catch yourself thinking they're just a terrible person or they have no respect for anyone, pause. You've activated the fundamental attribution error. Here's the correction. Before settling on a character-based explanation, generate 3 situational explanations for their behavior. Maybe they just received bad news you don't know about. Maybe they're under deadline pressure that's making them short with everyone. Maybe they're dealing with chronic pain, or insomnia, or a sick family member, or financial stress that's consuming their mental bandwidth. You don't need to know which explanation is true. You're not excusing them. You're simply recognizing that behavior emerges from a complex interaction between person and situation, and you only see half the equation. This practice does something subtle but powerful. It loosens the grip of your certainty. And when certainty loosens, suffering decreases. You're no longer carrying the story that you've been targeted by someone fundamentally defective. You're holding the more realistic, more compassionate understanding that you encountered someone having a difficult moment. Trick 10. Cognitive diffusion from narrative. The story doesn't stop with who they are. It expands. It becomes elaborate. It takes on a life of its own. You replay the interaction. You add commentary. You predict what will happen next. You imagine what they're saying about you to others. You construct entire scenarios that haven't happened and may never happen. And the more you engage with this story, the more real it becomes, the more distressing it feels. This is where acceptance and commitment therapy offers a deceptively simple tool: cognitive diffusion. The recognition that thoughts are not facts. That the story about the disrespect is not the same thing as the disrespect itself. Most of the suffering you're experiencing right now isn't coming from what happened. It's coming from the story you're telling about what happened. Here's the technique. Preface your thoughts with, "I'm having the thought that." Instead of "they humiliated me," think, "I'm having the thought that they humiliated me." Instead of "everyone saw and now they think less of me," think, "I'm having the thought that everyone saw and now they think less of me." Instead of "I'll never be respected in that environment," think, "I'm having the thought that I'll never be respected in that environment." Notice what happens when you do this. A small space opens up. The thought is still there, but you're no longer fused with it. You're no longer inside it, looking out. You're beside it, looking at it. This is metacognition, thinking about thinking. And it's one of your most valuable capacities. Because once you can observe a thought rather than inhabit it, you have a choice about whether to believe it, whether to follow it, whether to let it dictate your next action. Use this during rumination. Use it when you're telling the story to friends and you notice yourself getting increasingly upset. Use it when you wake up at night and the narrative machine starts running. You're not trying to eliminate the thoughts. You're changing your relationship to them. And that changes everything. Trick 11. Spotlight effect correction. Part of the story you're building involves other people. The witnesses. The people who saw what happened. You're convinced they noticed everything. You're certain they're talking about it. You imagine their judgments, their assessments, their diminished opinion of you. This is the spotlight effect, and it's costing you enormous amounts of unnecessary suffering. Thomas Gilovich's research revealed something fascinating. We consistently overestimate how much other people notice our social experiences. We feel like we're under a spotlight, like everyone is watching, recording, judging. But they're not. They're under their own spotlight, worried about their own social standing, consumed by their own concerns. The witnesses to your disrespectful interaction, they likely forgot about it within minutes. Not because they don't care about you, but because their attention is dominated by their own experience, not yours. Think about the last time you witnessed someone else being disrespected. How long did you think about it afterward? How much mental space did it occupy in your day? Probably very little. You noticed, perhaps felt momentary discomfort, then moved on to your own concerns. That's exactly what happened with the people who witnessed your moment. But you're still carrying the imagined weight of their judgment. You're suffering from something that exists primarily in your imagination. Here's the reality test. If you saw those witnesses tomorrow and asked them about the interaction, most wouldn't remember the details. Some wouldn't remember it happened at all. This doesn't mean the disrespect didn't matter. It means the social reputation damage you're imagining is vastly exaggerated. You're adding secondary suffering to the primary hurt, and this secondary suffering is based on a cognitive illusion. When you notice yourself worrying about what witnesses thought, remind yourself of the spotlight effect. Their attention was never as focused on you as you imagine. They've moved on. You can too. Trick 12. Hostile attribution bias audit. If you find yourself feeling disrespected frequently, if it seems like people are constantly dismissing you, undermining you, targeting you, there's something important you need to examine: hostile attribution bias. When you're in a threat state, when your nervous system has been primed to detect danger, you begin interpreting ambiguous behavior as hostile. A neutral comment sounds critical. A forgotten email feels like deliberate exclusion. A brief interaction registers as dismissal. This isn't paranoia. It's a predictable consequence of threat priming. Your brain, trying to keep you safe, errs on the side of detecting threat. Better to see danger that isn't there than to miss danger that is. But this creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. You perceive disrespect. You respond defensively. Others react to your defensiveness. This confirms your perception that they're hostile. The cycle reinforces itself. Breaking this cycle requires auditing your interpretations. For 1 week, journal every incident where you feel disrespected. Write down what happened, just the observable behavior, not your interpretation. Then, before writing your interpretation, generate 3 alternative explanations that are neutral or benign. They didn't respond to your email. Hostile interpretation: they're ignoring me because they don't respect me. Alternative interpretations: they're overwhelmed with emails and haven't gotten to it yet. They started to respond but got interrupted and forgot. They're waiting until they have time to give a thoughtful response. They cut you off in conversation. Hostile interpretation: they think what they have to say is more important than what I have to say. Alternative interpretations: they're excited and not monitoring their interruption tendency. They misread a pause as the end of my thought. They have a different cultural norm around conversational turn-taking. You're not trying to convince yourself nothing is ever hostile. You're examining whether you're systematically interpreting ambiguous behavior as hostile when other explanations fit equally well. After a week of this practice, patterns emerge. You'll see more clearly which incidents genuinely were disrespectful and which were your threat-primed nervous system seeing danger everywhere. And once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Trick 13. Emotional Granularity Enhancement. When someone asks how you feel about what happened, you probably say disrespected or angry or upset. These are real emotions, but they're also incredibly vague. And vagueness creates problems. Lisa Feldman Barrett's research on emotional granularity reveals something crucial. The more precisely you can label your emotions, the better you can regulate them. High emotional granularity, the ability to make fine-grained distinctions between feeling states, predicts better mental health, better coping, and less rumination. Disrespected is a category, not a specific emotion. Underneath that umbrella, what are you actually feeling? Dismissed? That's the feeling that your contribution was ignored, that what you said didn't register as worthy of attention. Patronized? That's the feeling of being talked down to, treated as less competent or knowledgeable than you are. Undermined? That's the feeling that someone actively worked to reduce others' confidence in you or your abilities. Humiliated? That's the feeling of public shame, of being made to feel small in front of others. Betrayed? That's the feeling that someone you trusted violated that trust. Each of these emotions, when named precisely, suggests a different response. If you were dismissed, you might need to assert your presence more clearly. If you were patronized, you might need to demonstrate competence. If you were undermined, you might need to address reputation management. If you were humiliated, you might need to process shame. If you were betrayed, you might need to renegotiate trust. But when everything is just disrespected or angry, you don't know which tool to reach for. Find an emotion wheel. They're freely available online. When processing what happened, use it to identify 3 or 4 specific emotions beyond the vague umbrella term. The naming itself will shift something. You'll feel more clarity. You'll know better what you need. Trick 14. Temporal Construal Level Shifting. Sometimes you need to extract a lesson from what happened without re-traumatizing yourself by diving back into the experiential details. You need distance, but not so much distance that you lose the learning. This is where Yakov Trope's work on construal level theory becomes useful. Psychological distance, whether temporal, spatial, social, or hypothetical, affects how we interpret events. Close up, we see concrete details and feel intense emotions. Far away, we see abstract patterns and feel less intensity. Neither perspective is better. Both are useful for different purposes. But when you're stuck in the intense, concrete, emotionally flooded close-up view, shifting to abstract, high-level construal can provide relief while preserving insight. Here's how you do it. Describe the event as if it happened to someone else, in another city, 6 months ago. Not, I was disrespected in the meeting today. Instead, a person attended a meeting where another person spoke to them dismissively. Not, my colleague humiliated me in front of everyone. Instead, in a workplace setting, One individual made a comment that caused another individual to feel publicly diminished. Notice what happens. The emotional charge decreases. The event becomes something you can examine rather than something you're trapped inside. From this distance, you can ask different questions. What was the dynamic? What pattern was playing out? What could someone in that situation do differently next time? What does this reveal about organizational culture or interpersonal skill deficits? You're not denying it happened to you. You're temporarily viewing it from a different construal level to access different cognitive resources. Once you've extracted the learning, you can return to the personal perspective if needed. But often, you'll find you don't need to. The abstract understanding is enough. Trick 15. Counterfactual thinking containment. If only I had said. What if I had responded differently? I should have. This is counterfactual thinking, imagining alternative versions of what happened. And in small doses, it serves a purpose. It helps you learn. It helps you prepare for next time. It helps you identify what you might do differently. But you're not doing it in small doses. You're doing it endlessly. You're replaying the conversation over and over, each time with a different script where you say the perfect thing, where you defend yourself brilliantly, where you emerge victorious. These are upward counterfactuals, imagining better outcomes than what actually occurred. And research shows they increase regret without improving future performance beyond the first few iterations. The first time you imagine what you could have said, you learn something. The second time, maybe you refine it. But the 10th time? The 20th? You're not learning anymore. You're just suffering. Here's the containment protocol. Give yourself 2 minutes of deliberate counterfactual thinking. Set a timer. During those 2 minutes, imagine all the things you could have said or done differently. Get it out. Let your mind run through the alternatives. When the timer goes off, deliberately stop. Out loud if necessary. Say, that served its purpose. I learned what I needed to learn. I'm done now. Then redirect your attention to something else. Not by force, but by choice. You're not suppressing the thoughts. You're recognizing they've completed their function. If the counterfactual thinking returns later, notice it, acknowledge it, and remind yourself, I already did this work. I've already extracted the lesson. This is just rumination now, and I'm choosing to stop. It takes practice. The mind wants to keep running the loop. But each time you contain it, each time you set the boundary, you strengthen your capacity to choose where your attention goes. Trick 16. Defensive pessimism containment. Before your next interaction with the person who disrespected you, you start preparing. But not preparing in a healthy, strategic way. You're preparing by expecting the worst. You imagine they'll disrespect you again. You rehearse your defensive responses. You plan for conflict. You tell yourself you're being realistic, that you're not going to be caught off guard this time. This is defensive pessimism, and while it can sometimes serve as a coping strategy, it often becomes self-handicapping. Here's the problem. Expecting disrespect primes you to find it. You enter the interaction already in a defensive stance. Your body language changes. Your tone changes. You interpret ambiguous behavior through the lens of your expectation. And because you're behaving defensively, they respond to your defensiveness, which confirms your expectation that they were going to be disrespectful. It's a confirmation bias loop, and you're creating exactly what you're trying to protect yourself from. The containment technique isn't naive optimism. It's conscious choice about your baseline expectation. Before the interaction, consciously plan for a neutral or even positive outcome. Not because you're certain it will happen, but because your expectation shapes your perception and your behavior. Notice how your body feels when you expect conflict versus when you expect neutrality. Notice what assumptions you make about their intentions. Notice how your expectation colors your interpretation of their first words, their facial expressions, their tone. You can still be prepared to set boundaries if needed. You can still have your exit strategies ready. But you don't enter the interaction from a defensive crouch. Approach with openness. Then respond to what actually happens, not to what you feared would happen. Trick 17. Mental contrasting. Sometimes you need to prepare for a potentially difficult interaction with more structure than simple expectation management. You need a method that combines realistic optimism with concrete planning. This is where Gabrielle Edingen's WOP method becomes invaluable. WOP stands for wish, outcome, obstacle, plan. It's based on research showing that positive fantasy alone actually weakens motivation and performance, but combining that fantasy with obstacle planning enhances both. Here's how you use it before a potentially disrespectful interaction. Wish, what do you want? A respectful conversation. To be heard. To set a boundary clearly. Outcome. How will you feel if you get what you want? Imagine it specifically. Relieved. Respected. Clearer about the relationship. More confident in your ability to handle difficult conversations. Obstacle. What's the main obstacle that might prevent this? They might interrupt. They might dismiss what you say. They might become defensive or aggressive. Plan. If the obstacle occurs, what will you do? Use an if-then structure. If they interrupt, then I'll use the phrase, I'm not finished, and continue. If they dismiss what I say, then I'll use the clarification ladder and ask for specifics. If they become aggressive, then I'll end the conversation and leave. What this does is powerful. You've engaged the motivating power of positive visualization while immunizing yourself against the passivity that positive fantasy creates. You've planned for the obstacle, which means you're not thrown when it occurs. You have a predetermined response. This reduces anxiety and increases agency. You're not going in blind. You're not going in defensively pessimistic. You're going in with clear intention and clear contingency plans. Trick 18. Self-distancing through linguistic shift. Finally, there's a technique so simple it seems almost trivial, but the neuroscience behind it is remarkable. It's about how you talk to yourself during or immediately after a disrespectful interaction. Most of us use first-person self-talk. What am I feeling? Why am I so upset? I can't believe they said that to me. Ethan Kross's research shows that shifting to third-person self-talk, using your own name, creates psychological distance that reduces emotional reactivity and enhances reasoning. Instead of, what am I feeling right now? Think, what is your name? For example, Mark, feeling right now. Instead of, why am I so upset? Think, why is Mark so upset? Instead of, I need to figure out how to respond. Think, Mark needs to figure out how to respond. What happens neurologically is fascinating. The third-person perspective engages the same neural systems you use when reasoning about other people's problems. You gain access to wisdom and clarity that gets obscured when you're trapped in the first-person experiential perspective. You're not dissociating. You're not denying your experience. You're simply viewing yourself the way you might view a friend coming to you with this problem. And from that perspective, you usually know what to do. During the interaction itself, if you can access it, this linguistic shift can be remarkably stabilizing. What does Mark need to say right now is a different question than what do I need to say. The first creates space. The second feels urgent and pressured. After the interaction, use it for processing. Mark was disrespected today. What does Mark need right now? You'll find you have clearer answers than when you ask, what do I need? Trick 19. The boundary setting formula. There comes a moment when you realize that managing your internal response isn't enough. The disrespect isn't a one-time occurrence. It's a pattern, and patterns require something different from emotional regulation or cognitive reframing. They require a clear, explicit boundary. Most people struggle with boundary setting because they don't have a structure. They either say too much, explaining, justifying, defending, or they say too little, leaving the other person confused about what actually needs to change. The result is either escalation or ineffectiveness. The boundary setting formula gives you a structure that works. When X happens, I feel Y, I need Z. 3 components. No more, no less. X is the specific, observable behavior. Not their character. Not their intentions. Not your interpretation. Just what they did. When you interrupt me in meetings. When you make comments about my appearance. When you dismiss my suggestions without consideration. Why is your feeling? 1 or 2 words. Not a story. Not an accusation. Just the emotional impact. I feel undermined. I feel uncomfortable. I feel disrespected. Z is what you need to change. Clear, specific, behavioral. Not, I need you to respect me. That's too vague. I need you to let me finish my points before responding. I need you to stop commenting on my body. I need you to engage with my ideas on their merits. This formula works because it removes ambiguity. They know exactly what behavior to change. It focuses on behavior, not character, which reduces defensiveness. And it provides a clear path forward. They don't have to guess what would repair the situation. When you use this, keep your tone neutral. Not angry, not pleading. Factual. You're sharing information, not attacking. You're stating a need, not making a demand you hope they'll comply with out of guilt or fear. When you interrupt me in meetings, I feel undermined. I need you to let me finish my points. That's it. Then stop talking. Let the simplicity stand. Don't dilute it with explanation or apology. The boundary is clear. Now you wait to see if they respect it. Trick 20. Relational contract explicit negotiation. Most disrespect doesn't come from malice. It comes from mismatched expectations that neither person ever articulated. You think respectful communication looks one way. They think it looks another way. Neither of you stated your assumptions. So you keep violating each other's unspoken rules, and both of you feel disrespected. This is where explicit negotiation becomes essential. You're making the implicit relational contract explicit. You're having the conversation about how you communicate, not just what you communicate about. This works in ongoing relationships, partnerships, family, long-term work relationships, where recurring issues suggest a structural problem rather than a one-time incident. The approach is straightforward. I'd like to discuss how we communicate when we disagree. What works for you? Notice what that question does. It frames the conversation as collaborative, not confrontational. You're not saying, here's how you need to communicate with me. You're opening a negotiation. You're inviting them to share their needs while you share yours. They might say they need directness, or time to process before responding, or to discuss things immediately rather than letting them build up. You share your needs. You find the overlap and the friction points. Then you negotiate. Okay, so you need directness and I need to avoid raised voices. Can we commit to being direct while keeping our volume level? You need immediate discussion and I need processing time. Can we agree that when something comes up, we'll set a time within 24 hours to discuss it? You're creating an explicit agreement about the terms of engagement. And once those terms are explicit, violations are clear. You're no longer guessing whether something crossed a line. You have a shared standard you both agreed to. This won't prevent all disrespect, but it will dramatically reduce the kind that comes from mismatched expectations. And it provides a foundation to point back to when someone violates the explicit agreement you made together. Trick 21. The broken record technique. You've set a boundary. You've been clear. And now they're trying to negotiate it away. But why? That's not fair. You're being too sensitive. Just this once. Let me explain why. Each of these is a conversational hook. They're invitations for you to engage and debate about the boundary. And if you engage, you've already lost. Because boundaries aren't up for debate. They're not positions you need to defend. They're limits you're establishing. The broken record technique, developed by assertiveness trainers decades ago, remains one of the most effective tools for maintaining a boundary under pressure. The principle is simple, calm, consistent repetition without elaboration or justification. They push. You repeat. They push from a different angle. You repeat. They try a new argument. You repeat. I'm not discussing this today. But we need to resolve this now. I'm not discussing this today. You're being unreasonable. I'm not discussing this today. Fine, but you need to understand why. I'm not discussing this today. What makes this work is what you're not doing. You're not getting drawn into justifying your boundary. You're not defending it. You're not explaining it. You're not providing new information for them to argue against. You're simply restating the boundary, calmly, as many times as necessary. Most people give up after 3 to 5 repetitions. They realize there's no conversational hook to grab onto. There's no argument to counter. There's just a wall that repeats the same information. Your tone matters here. Not angry, not defensive, just calm and firm, like you're stating an unchangeable fact. The sky is blue. I'm not discussing this today. The sky is blue. This technique feels strange the first time you use it. You'll feel the pull to elaborate, to justify, to explain yourself. Resist it. The power is in the repetition. The power is in the refusal to be drawn into debate. Trick 22. Fogging, strategic agreement. Sometimes the disrespect comes wrapped in criticism. And sometimes that criticism has a kernel of truth buried inside the disrespectful delivery. This creates a dilemma. If you defend against the criticism, you look defensive. If you accept the criticism, you accept the disrespectful framing. Fogging, a technique from Manuel Smith's assertiveness training, offers a third option: agree with the possible truth without accepting the criticism as stated. Someone says, "You're always late. You have no respect for other people's time." Fogging response: "You might be right that I've been late recently. Notice what you did. You agreed with the factual component. You have been late recently. But you didn't accept always. You didn't accept the character assessment, and you didn't accept their interpretation of your motives. You're so disorganized. I don't know how you get anything done." Fogging response: "It's possible my organizational system looks different from yours." Again, you've agreed with something. There is a difference in organizational systems, without accepting their judgment about it. Why this works? It removes the resistance that escalates conflict. When you defend, they push harder. When you agree strategically, there's nothing to push against. The argument deflates. Fogging also maintains your dignity. You're not rolling over. You're not accepting abuse. You're acknowledging possible truth while rejecting the disrespectful framing. The key phrases: "You might be right. That's possible. I can see how you'd think that. There may be some truth to that." Then, and this is crucial, you exit the conversation. You don't elaborate. You don't explain. You've acknowledged what needed acknowledging, and now you leave. "You might be right. I need to go now." Fogging isn't for every situation. It's specifically for when criticism contains truth but is delivered disrespectfully. You extract the useful information, deflect the disrespect, and end the interaction. Trick 23. Negative inquiry. Sometimes you suspect that criticism isn't actually about helping you improve. It's veiled disrespect. It's manipulation disguised as feedback. But you're not certain, and you don't want to dismiss legitimate concerns. Negative inquiry gives you a way to test whether criticism is substantive or empty. You ask for specifics. You keep asking for specifics. Respectful critics can provide them. Manipulators cannot. You're not a team player. Negative inquiry. What specifically did I do that made you think that? If they're offering genuine feedback, they'll say something like, "In yesterday's meeting, when we were discussing the project timeline, you advocated for your deadline without asking about how it would impact other people's workloads." That's specific. That's actionable. That's criticism you can work with. But if they're being manipulative, they'll deflect. You know what I mean. It's just your general attitude. Everyone can see it. I shouldn't have to spell it out for you. Those responses tell you everything. They can't provide specifics because there aren't any. The criticism is a weapon, not feedback. So you ask again. "I want to understand. Can you give me a specific example of what I did?" They deflect again. You ask again. "I'm trying to improve. What specific behavior should I change?" Usually by the third request for specifics, the dynamic becomes clear. Either they provide actionable detail, in which case you have something real to consider, or they reveal that the criticism is empty, just a way to undermine you. Negative inquiry works because it calls the bluff without being confrontational. You're not saying "you're lying" or "that's not true." You're simply asking for the specificity that genuine feedback requires. And once you know what you're dealing with, substantive criticism or manipulative disrespect, you know how to respond. Trick 24. Time boundary assertion. They've cornered you. Maybe literally, maybe just conversationally. They want to have a difficult discussion right now. You're not ready. You're tired. You're caught off guard. You're in the middle of something else. The timing is wrong, and you know if you engage now, it won't go well. But they're pressing. "We need to talk about this now." And you feel the pressure to comply because saying no feels aggressive or avoidant. Here's what you need to understand. You have the right to control when discussions happen, not just if they happen. This is temporal autonomy, and it's a boundary as legitimate as any other. Disrespect often involves timing control. They choose when to confront you, and it's usually when you're disadvantaged, when you're rushed, distracted, exhausted, or publicly visible. This isn't coincidence. The timing is strategic, whether consciously or not. Reclaiming temporal autonomy restores balance. I'm willing to discuss this, but not right now. I'm available tomorrow at 2 p.m. Notice the structure. You're not refusing the conversation. You're refusing this timing. You're demonstrating good faith by offering an alternative time. And you're being specific about when you're available. They might push back. This can't wait. It'll only take a minute. Why are you avoiding this? You repeat, I'm willing to discuss this tomorrow at 2 p.m. You don't need to explain why now doesn't work. You don't need to justify your boundary around timing. The boundary itself is sufficient. If it's genuinely urgent, if there's a deadline or time-sensitive issue, you can acknowledge that while still maintaining control. I understand it's time-sensitive. I can give it the attention it deserves at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Will that work? Most things that feel urgent aren't. And even truly urgent matters benefit from you being in a state where you can engage effectively. Rushing into a difficult conversation when you're not ready serves no one. Control the timing. The conversation will happen, but it will happen when you're prepared to engage with it properly. Trick 25. Physical boundary calibration. Sometimes disrespect doesn't come through words. It comes through space. They stand too close. They lean over you. They use their physical presence to intimidate or dominate. And because it's not verbal, because nothing explicit is being said, you question whether you're allowed to respond to it. You are. Edward T. Hall's research on proxemics, the study of personal space and its effects on human behavior, established clear zones. Intimate distance is 0 to 18 inches, reserved for people we're close to. Personal distance is 18 inches to 4 feet, for friends and familiar interactions. Social distance is 4 to 7 feet, appropriate for professional and casual social interactions. When someone invades your social or personal distance without invitation, they're communicating dominance. They're using physical proximity to create discomfort, to make you feel small, to establish hierarchical superiority. Your calibration is simple. Step back. Literally. Physically. Step back to a distance that feels conversationally comfortable. Usually that 4 to 7 foot social distance range. Don't ask permission. Don't explain. Just create the space you need. Then notice what they do. Most people, once you've established the boundary, will respect it. They might not even be conscious they were violating it. But some will step forward again, closing the gap you just created. That's information. That's them telling you the proximity violation was intentional, that they're using space as a dominance tool. If they close the gap again, step back again. You're not having a conversation about it. You're simply maintaining the physical boundary you need. If they continue to pursue, closing distance repeatedly, the behavior has crossed from thoughtless to aggressive. At that point, you can verbalize. I need more space to have this conversation comfortably. Physical boundaries are boundaries. You don't need to tolerate someone's presence in your personal space any more than you need to tolerate their verbal disrespect. Your body knows when proximity feels wrong. Trust that knowing and create the distance you need. Trick 26. Emotional labor withdrawal. You've noticed a pattern. When they're upset, you soothe them. When they're defensive, you reassure them. When they're uncomfortable with conflict, you soften your legitimate concerns to make things easier for them. You're managing their emotions, maintaining their comfort, doing the work of keeping the relational peace. And they're still disrespecting you. This is emotional labor, Arlie Hochschild's term for the work of managing feelings, your own and others, to maintain social harmony. And here's what you need to understand. Emotional labor is work. It's effort. It's a choice. And you can choose to stop performing it for people who disrespect you. You're not obligated to manage their emotions. You're not responsible for their comfort. You're not required to cushion every hard truth or smooth over every awkward moment at the expense of your own dignity. Withdrawal looks like this. You stop soothing. When they get upset in response to your boundary, you let them be upset. You don't rush to make it better. You don't apologize for having needs. You don't explain away their discomfort. You stop preemptively softening your words. You say what needs to be said clearly, without decorating it with qualifiers and apologies designed to protect their feelings. You stop managing their reactions. If they sulk, they sulk. If they get defensive, they get defensive. Their emotional regulation is their responsibility, not yours. This feels uncomfortable at first. You've been trained, probably since childhood, that maintaining relational harmony is your job. Women especially carry this burden disproportionately. But when someone is disrespecting you, continuing to perform emotional labor for them is participating in your own mistreatment. Let the discomfort exist. It's not your job to resolve it. Your job is to maintain your boundaries and your dignity. Their job is to manage their own emotional response to that. Trick 27. The information diet. They've proven themselves untrustworthy. Something you shared in confidence, something vulnerable, something personal, they used it against you. They weaponized your openness. And now you're wondering how to navigate a relationship where you can't trust them with the truth of your life. The answer is the information diet. Strategic limitation of what you share. Information is power in relationships. The more someone knows about you, your fears, your insecurities, your struggles, your hopes, the more leverage they have. With trustworthy people, this vulnerability creates intimacy. With untrustworthy people, it creates risk. Once someone has demonstrated they'll weaponize your vulnerability, you stop offering it. You share only what's operationally necessary. Surface information, logistical details, facts without emotional content. They ask about your weekend. It was fine. Not the story about what you struggled with or celebrated or felt anxious about. Just fine. They ask about your project at work. It's progressing. Not the details about what's challenging or exciting or concerning. Just progressing. They try to go deeper, asking personal questions. I'd rather not get into that. Redirect. Change subject. Keep it light. This isn't lying. It's curation. You're curating what you share based on demonstrated trustworthiness. They've shown you who they are in relationship to your vulnerability. You're believing them and adjusting accordingly. Some people will notice the shift. They might ask why you're being distant. You don't owe them an explanation, but if you want to provide one, I'm being more careful about what I share. I've learned I need to. The information diet doesn't mean the relationship ends. It means the relationship continues at a level of intimacy that matches their demonstrated trustworthiness. They want deeper connection? They can earn it through respectful behavior over time. But until then, the diet remains in place. Trick 28. Relationship demotion. You've tried boundary setting. You've had the explicit conversations. You've given them chances to change. And they haven't. The disrespect continues. The relationship as it exists is causing you harm. But you can't or won't completely sever it. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's a coworker you can't avoid. Maybe there are shared responsibilities or connections that make complete separation impractical. This is when relationship demotion becomes necessary. You consciously move them from your inner circle to your outer circle. You reduce their access to you, their importance in your life, your investment in the relationship. They were a close friend. Now they're an acquaintance. They were someone you confided in. Now they're someone you're cordial with. They were in your daily life. Now they're occasional. Demotion means reducing contact frequency. You don't initiate anymore. You respond when necessary, but not quickly, not eagerly. The relationship operates on your terms now, not theirs. It means reducing depth of sharing. You apply the information diet. Conversations stay surface level. You don't share your inner life anymore. They're not entitled to it. It means reducing emotional investment. You stop hoping they'll change. You stop being disappointed when they don't. You accept who they are and adjust your expectations accordingly. This isn't punishment. This is protection. You're honoring the reality of who they've proven themselves to be. They're not capable of or interested in the kind of relationship you were offering. So you're offering a different kind of relationship, one that matches their behavioral trustworthiness. Some people never notice they've been demoted. The relationship continues at this new, more distant level, and they accept it. Others notice and ask what's changed. You can be honest. I need to protect myself. This is what that looks like. Demotion is not failure. It's wisdom. It's recognizing that not everyone earns or deserves the same level of access to your life. And it's choosing to place people where they belong based on their behavior, not your wishes about who they could be. Trick 29. The metacommunication frame. Sometimes the problem isn't what you're discussing. It's how you're discussing it. The content might be reasonable, but the process, the tone, the interruptions, the talking over each other, has become dysfunctional. And if you keep engaging with the content while the process is broken, you'll never resolve anything. This is where metacommunication becomes essential. Metacommunication is Gregory Bateson's concept of communicating about the communication itself. You step outside the content level and address the process level. Instead of continuing to argue about the topic while being interrupted, you say, "I notice we're talking over each other. Can we slow down and take turns?" Instead of defending yourself against dismissive comments, you say, "I'm noticing a pattern where my concerns are being minimized. Can we talk about that?" Instead of escalating in response to their hostile tone, you say, "The way we're speaking to each other right now isn't working for me. Can we pause and reset?" What you're doing is naming the dynamic without getting caught in it. You're creating a frame around the conversation that allows both of you to see what's happening from outside. This interrupts dysfunctional patterns because it shifts the focus. They can't keep interrupting while you're discussing the fact that interruption is happening. They can't keep being dismissive while you're naming the dismissiveness. The key is to keep your metacommunication observation-based and neutral. Not, "You're being aggressive." That's judgment. Instead, "I notice our volume is increasing and we're cutting each other off." That's observation. Not, "You never listen to me." That's characterization. Instead, "I notice when I speak, the subject changes quickly without acknowledgement of what I said." That's description. Metacommunication works best when the problem is process, not content. When the what isn't the issue, the how is. Use it to interrupt patterns, to create space, to bring awareness to dynamics that are operating beneath conscious attention. Trick 30, the Columbo technique. They've just made a sweeping statement about you. A dismissive generalization. An assumption that reveals disrespect. And you feel the urge to defend, to correct, to argue. Don't. Instead, ask questions. Naive-seeming, genuinely curious questions that force them to articulate their logic. This is the Columbo technique, named after the detective who solved cases by playing dumb and asking simple questions until the suspect revealed themselves. It's Socratic method applied to interpersonal disrespect. You're not cut out for this kind of work. Instead of defending your competence, ask, "Help me understand. What specifically about my work led you to that conclusion? You're being too emotional about this." Instead of arguing you're not emotional, ask, "What would non-emotional look like to you in this situation?" Nobody agrees with you on this. Instead of disputing that claim, ask, "Who specifically did you talk to, and what did they say?" What you're doing is forcing them to make their logic explicit. Most disrespectful statements rely on vagueness. They're sweeping, general, unsubstantiated. When you ask for specifics, one of two things happens. Either they provide substance, in which case you now have something concrete to address, or they can't. They deflect, they generalize further, they get frustrated. And in that moment, their lack of substance becomes apparent. They hear their own unreasonableness. The technique works because you're not being confrontational. You're being curious. Your tone is genuinely puzzled, genuinely interested in understanding their thinking. This disarms them. They can't accuse you of being defensive when you're asking questions. But underneath the naive curiosity, you're doing something strategic. You're exposing faulty logic. You're making them defend their disrespectful statement. And most people, when forced to defend vague dismissiveness with specifics, realize they don't have much to stand on. "Help me understand how you arrived at that conclusion about me." Say it with genuine curiosity. Then wait. Let them try to explain. Listen to them struggle to find specifics that don't exist. The question does the work. You don't need to argue. You just need to ask. Trick 31, strategic silence. They've just said something disrespectful. You feel the impulse to respond immediately, to defend, to explain, to fill the space. This is natural. Silence feels uncomfortable, and our instinct is to eliminate discomfort by talking. But strategic silence, deliberate pause used as a communicative tool, is one of your most powerful responses to disrespect. When someone says something disrespectful and you respond immediately, you've absorbed the weight of their words and taken on the work of addressing them. The discomfort becomes yours to resolve. But when you pause, when you simply look at them and wait, the discomfort stays with them. The weight of their words sits in the space between you. They feel it, and often, they'll rush to fill that silence with backtracking, with clarification, with something that reveals more than they intended. The technique is simple. They say something disrespectful. You count to 7. Slowly. Maintain neutral eye contact. Don't break the gaze. Don't rush to fill the space. Just wait. 7 seconds feels like an eternity in conversation. Most people will start talking again before you reach 7. And what they say in that discomfort often tells you exactly what you need to know about their intent. Sometimes they'll soften. What I meant was, they're already backtracking, already recognizing their words landed wrong. Sometimes they'll double down. What? It's true. They're revealing the disrespect was intentional, not accidental. Sometimes they'll deflect. Why are you looking at me like that? They're uncomfortable with the weight of what they said. All of this is information. Information you get without having to defend yourself, without having to explain, without having to do any work at all. Strategic silence also gives you processing time. In those 7 seconds, your nervous system settles slightly. Your prefrontal cortex comes back online. You're not reacting from amygdala activation. You're choosing your response from a calmer place. The silence communicates volumes. It says, I heard what you said. I'm considering it. You need to sit with what you just put into the world. Not every disrespectful comment deserves your words. Sometimes your silence is the most articulate response you can give. Trick 32. The observation-only statement. When you need to address a pattern of disrespect, the way you frame it determines whether they can hear you or whether they immediately defend. Most people frame it with interpretation. You're dismissive. You don't respect my input. You're always interrupting me. These are judgments. They're your conclusions about their behavior. And judgments trigger defensiveness. Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication offers a different approach. Separate observation from interpretation. State only what happened, the verifiable, objective behavior, without adding your meaning-making. Not, you're always interrupting me. That's interpretation mixed with exaggeration. Instead, I've noticed that in the last 3 meetings, I've been interrupted within the first minute of speaking. That's pure observation. They can verify it. They can't argue with it because it's factual. Not, you dismiss everything I say. That's interpretation. Instead, when I made that suggestion, you said that won't work without asking questions or discussing it. That's description of what happened. The observation-only statement is impossible to argue with because it doesn't contain opinion. It's just data. What they do with that data, whether they acknowledge it, justify it, or dismiss it, gives you more information. But you've stated the facts in a way that removes the easy out of, that's not how I meant it, or you're being too sensitive. Facts are facts. Here's what happened. Here's what I observed. The pattern is real, and now we're both looking at it. This approach works because it keeps you grounded in the verifiable. You're not mind reading. You're not interpreting motives. You're not characterizing their personality. You're just describing behavior. And behavior is where change happens. When you name specific, observable behavior, you give them something concrete to adjust. Stop dismissing me as vague. When I make a suggestion, ask at least one question about it before deciding is actionable. Observation-only statements require practice. Your mind wants to add interpretation. You want to explain what their behavior means. Resist. Stay with the observable. Let the facts speak. Trick 33. The consequence clarity statement. You've stated your boundary. They violated it. Now you need to articulate what happens next. Not as a threat. Not with anger. As neutral, factual information about natural consequences. The consequence clarity statement removes your emotion from the equation and simply states reality. If X continues, Y will happen. If this continues, I'll need to involve HR. Not, I'm going to report you. Not, you're making me do this. Just the factual consequence stated neutrally. If you raise your voice again, I'll leave the conversation. Not, you're making me so uncomfortable I can't stay. Just what will happen if the behavior continues. If I'm interrupted again, I'll stop presenting and we can reschedule when everyone can listen. Not, you're all so rude I can't even finish. Just the natural consequence stated as fact. What makes this work is the transfer of responsibility. You're not controlling them. You're not trying to change them through guilt or fear. You're simply informing them of cause and effect. They get to choose. Their behavior determines the outcome. This also respects their agency. They're adults who can make choices about their behavior. You're just being clear about what your choice will be in response. The tone is crucial. This isn't delivered with satisfaction, like you're enjoying having leverage. It's not delivered with anger, like you're punishing them. It's delivered the way you'd share any factual information. If it rains, the event moves indoors. Neutral. Informational. Matter of fact. When you state consequences this way, most people recalibrate. They realize there's a real boundary here, that continued violation has concrete outcomes. Some will test it once to see if you mean it. This is why follow-through is essential. If you state a consequence and don't implement it when the boundary is violated again, you've taught them your consequences are empty. But when you follow through, when you actually leave the conversation, when you actually involve HR, when you actually reschedule the meeting, you establish that your words match your actions. The consequence clarity statement becomes credible, and credible consequences change behavior. Trick 34. Linguistic presupposition dismantling. Disrespectful communication often works by hiding assumptions inside question structures. The disrespect isn't in what they're asking. It's in what they're assuming as they ask it. Why are you always so sensitive? The question seems to invite explanation, but embedded inside it is a presupposition that you are always sensitive. If you answer the question, you've accepted the premise. You've agreed that you are, in fact, always sensitive, and now you're just explaining why. This is linguistic manipulation, whether intentional or not. And the way to address it is presupposition dismantling, identifying the embedded assumption and challenging it before engaging with the question. I don't accept the premise that I'm always sensitive. What specific behavior are you referring to? You've separated the presupposition from the question. You've rejected the characterization, and you've redirected to specifics. Why don't you ever take feedback well? Embedded presupposition. You never take feedback well. Dismantling. I don't agree that I never take feedback well. Can you tell me about a specific instance where you felt I didn't respond appropriately? Why do you have such a problem with authority? Embedded presupposition. You have a problem with authority. Dismantling. I'm not sure I have a problem with authority. What made you think that? What you're doing is refusing to engage with the question until the presupposition is addressed. You're not being difficult. You're being precise. Because if you let false premises slide, they become part of the accepted reality of the conversation. This technique requires you to listen carefully not just to what's being said, but to what's being assumed. When you notice words like always, never, still, or such a, these often signal presupposition. Why are you still upset about this? Presupposes you shouldn't be. Why do you have such a negative attitude? Presupposes your attitude is negative. Name it. Challenge it. Refuse to proceed until the assumption is examined. Only then can you have an honest conversation about the actual topic. Trick 35. The reciprocity audit. You ask them about their day, their projects, their concerns. They talk. You listen. You ask follow-up questions. You show interest. But when it's your turn to share, they check their phone. They change the subject. They offer minimal acknowledgement and redirect back to themselves. This is a reciprocity imbalance, and it's a form of disrespect that operates quietly over time until you realize the conversational exchange has been one-directional for weeks, months, maybe years. The reciprocity audit makes this invisible dynamic visible. You explicitly name the pattern and request change. I've noticed I ask about your perspective often, but you rarely ask about mine. I'd like that to change. That's it. Simple, direct, observation-based, request included. Or, I've noticed our conversations focus primarily on your concerns. I'd like us to discuss mine with equal attention. What this does is appeal to the fairness norm. Most people, when confronted with data about imbalance, will recognize it and adjust. Not because they're bad people, but because they weren't tracking it. The pattern was operating beneath their awareness. Some people will defend. That's not true. I ask about you. At which point you can offer specific examples. In our last 5 conversations, you mentioned what you're working on each time. I don't think you've asked me about my projects once in the past month. Facts matter here. If you've been tracking, even informally, you have data. The pattern is real. You're not making it up. The reciprocity audit works because it removes the ambiguity of "I feel like you don't care" and replaces it with observable behavior. It's not about feelings. It's about conversational patterns. Who asks? Who answers? Who takes up space? Who receives attention? When reciprocity is genuinely balanced, both people feel seen. When it's imbalanced, one person becomes a supporting character in the other person's narrative. The audit resets that. It says, we're both main characters here. Act accordingly. Trick 36. Tone matching calibration. You've been calm. You've been measured. You've been reasonable. And they're dismissing you. Not because your content is wrong, but because your calm delivery is being read as weakness or lack of conviction. You don't even seem to care about this. If it really mattered to you, you'd be more upset. Why are you so calm? Your calmness, which you thought would help, is being weaponized against you. This is when tone-matching calibration becomes necessary. You adjust your emotional intensity to meet theirs without matching their hostility. You're mirroring their energy level while maintaining substance control. If they're speaking with intensity, you increase your vocal firmness. You reduce verbal softeners, the maybe, sort of, I think. You make your statements more direct. Not louder necessarily, but firmer. Not hostile, but more assertive. They're at a 7 in intensity. You move from your 3 to a 6. You're meeting their energy, which prevents the dismissal of "you're not even taking this seriously." But you're not matching their content. You're not becoming hostile, insulting, or disrespectful in return. I need you to listen. This matters. Here's what's not acceptable. The words are direct. The tone carries weight. There's no verbal decoration, no qualifiers, no softening. But there's also no attack, no character assassination, no escalation into hostility. What this does is recalibrate their perception. You're not weak. You're not indifferent. You care enough to bring energy to this. They can no longer dismiss your calm as apathy. Tone matching requires calibration because you don't want to overmatch. If you go too high, you've escalated into an unproductive place. The goal is to meet their energy just enough to be taken seriously while staying below the threshold where the conversation becomes pure conflict. Read the room. Read their intensity. Adjust yours accordingly. Not to their exact level. That's escalation. But close enough that they can't use your composure against you. Trick 37. The exit script. The conversation has gone somewhere you didn't agree to. It's become hostile, circular, unproductive, or abusive. You need to leave. But in the moment, with your nervous system activated and your cognitive resources depleted, finding the right words to exit with dignity feels impossible. This is why you prepare the exit script in advance. You memorize a short, clear statement for ending conversations that have crossed your tolerance threshold. You rehearse it so that when you need it, it's there, automatic, no thinking required. The script needs 3 elements: acknowledgement that the conversation isn't working, statement that you're leaving, and offering a future possibility if appropriate. This conversation isn't productive. I'm stepping away now. We can revisit when we're both calmer. Or, I'm not willing to continue this conversation in this tone. I'm leaving. Let me know when you're ready to speak respectfully. Or simply, I need to stop this conversation. We can talk later. The power is in the simplicity. You're not explaining. You're not justifying. You're not asking permission. You're stating what's happening. Memorize your script. Practice it. Say it out loud in your car so the words are familiar in your mouth. Because when you need it, you'll be in a state where creating language is difficult. The pre-prepared script removes that cognitive load. And then, this is crucial, you follow through. You actually leave. You don't let them pull you back in with "wait, just one more thing," or "you can't just walk away." Yes, you can. You just told them you're leaving. Now you leave. If you're in person, you physically exit. If you're on phone, you say the script and hang up. If you're in a meeting, you close your laptop and leave the room. If you're in text, you send the script and put the phone down. The exit script works because it preserves your dignity while ending an interaction that's become harmful. You're not fleeing in chaos. You're making a clear choice and executing it with composure. Have your script ready. When you need it, you'll be grateful it's there. Trick 38. Paradoxical agreement. Sometimes people are disrespectful because they're in pain. They're frustrated, overwhelmed, hurt, or scared, and their distress is coming out as hostility toward you. They're not bad people. They're people behaving badly in a difficult moment. This doesn't mean you accept the mistreatment, but it does mean you have an option beyond defending or attacking. Paradoxical agreement. You agree with the underlying emotion while rejecting the behavioral expression. They snap at you. I can't believe you're bothering me with this right now. Don't you see I'm overwhelmed? Paradoxical agreement. I can see you're really frustrated. I want to help solve this. And I won't continue if you speak to me that way. You've done 3 things. You've validated their emotional reality. They are frustrated. You've expressed willingness to help. You're not the enemy. And you've set a boundary. The behavior isn't acceptable. Or they lash out. You wouldn't understand. You never have to deal with this kind of pressure. Paradoxical agreement. It sounds like you're under enormous pressure right now. I'd like to understand better. I also need us to communicate respectfully. Can we do that? You're not disagreeing with their stress. You're not minimizing their struggle. You're acknowledging it while simultaneously maintaining that acknowledgement doesn't excuse disrespect. This technique defuses hostility because you're not giving them something to push against. You're not defending. You're not denying their experience. You're meeting them with empathy while holding your boundary. Most people, when their emotion is acknowledged, will soften. Not all. Some are too far into their stress response to be reached. But many will recognize that you're trying to work with them, not against them, and they'll adjust their approach. The paradoxical agreement works best when you genuinely can see their humanity beneath their behavior. If you're feeling only anger toward them, it will come across as manipulative. But if you can access even a small amount of compassion, they're suffering, they're struggling, they're doing their best, and it's not enough right now. That compassion will come through in your tone. And compassion paired with boundaries is one of the most powerful combinations available to you. It says, I see you, I care, and I won't be mistreated. All 3 can be true simultaneously. Trick 39. Power differential explicit naming. There's an elephant in the room. They have power over you. They're your manager, your professor, your landlord, someone who controls resources or decisions that affect your life. And this power is shaping the conversation in ways neither of you are acknowledging. They can be disrespectful because the hierarchy protects them. You have to be careful because the hierarchy constrains you. This unstated reality hovers over every word, making the interaction fundamentally unequal. The technique is counterintuitive. Name it. Bring the power differential out of the shadows and into explicit awareness. I recognize you're my manager, and that affects this conversation. Here's what I need regardless of that dynamic. Or, I'm aware you control my grade, and that creates an unequal situation here. I still need to address this issue. Or, I know you're senior to me in this organization. What I'm about to say is important enough that I need to say it anyway. What happens when you name the power differential is subtle but significant. You've removed their ability to leverage it subtly. The manipulation that works in shadow doesn't work as well in light. You've established that you see the structure, you understand it, and you're choosing to speak anyway. This also signals something important about you. You're not naive. You're not unaware of the dynamics at play. You understand the risk you're taking by speaking up. This awareness commands a different kind of respect than pretending the power differential doesn't exist. Some people will appreciate the honesty. The explicit naming creates a shared reality. Yes, this power difference exists, and now we can navigate it consciously rather than having it operate invisibly. Others will be unsettled. They were relying on the unstated power to do the work for them. Now they have to decide, will they use their power overtly, or will they engage with your concern on its merits? Either way, you've shifted the dynamic. The elephant is visible. And visible elephants are easier to navigate than invisible ones. Trick 40. Coalition building documentation. When you're dealing with disrespect from someone who has organizational power over you, isolation is your greatest vulnerability. If it's just your word against theirs, if there's no record, If no one else knows what's happening, you're in a precarious position. Coalition-building documentation creates both a paper trail and a witness network. You're establishing a pattern through contemporaneous records and ensuring that pattern is visible to others who can corroborate or intervene. The documentation is straightforward. After every significant interaction, email yourself a summary. Date, time, what was said, what was done, who was present. Not emotional interpretation, just facts. On December 5th at 2:15 p.m. in Conference Room B, during the budget meeting, name, said, specific quote. Present were list names. Then, and this is crucial, you loop in appropriate witnesses or stakeholders in ways that feel natural. You send a follow-up email to the person. Per our conversation today, at 2 p.m., I understand you're requesting X. I'll have that to you by Friday. Just wanted to confirm I understood correctly. Copy anyone who was present or who needs to know. You're not accusing. You're not creating drama. You're simply documenting and confirming understanding. But now there's a record. Now others are aware. If the disrespect continues, you have timestamps. You have documentation showing you tried to address it professionally. You have evidence of pattern, not isolated incident. This matters because isolated targets are vulnerable. If you're the only one who knows, if there's no documentation, the person with power can deny, minimize, or rewrite history. That's not what happened. You're being too sensitive. I never said that. But when you have documentation, when you have witnesses, when you've built awareness across your network, you're no longer isolated. The pattern is visible to others. Your account has corroboration. This isn't paranoia. This is protection. And in situations where power is being misused, protection is necessary. Trick 41. Institutional rule leverage. Most organizations have policies about respectful workplace conduct. Most educational institutions have codes about appropriate teacher-student interaction. Most professional associations have ethics guidelines. These rules exist. The question is whether you'll use them. Institutional rule leverage means explicitly referencing the policies, guidelines, or explicit rules that the disrespectful behavior violates. You're depersonalizing the conflict by anchoring it to an objective standard that exists outside both of you. According to our Employee Handbook Section 4.2, respectful communication in the workplace is required. What happened in today's meeting doesn't align with that policy. I'm requesting it stop. Or, the professional code we both operate under specifies that feedback should be constructive and specific. I'd like our interactions to reflect that standard. Or, company policy states that performance concerns should be addressed in private. Having this conversation in front of the team violated that policy. What this does is shift the conversation from personal grievance to policy compliance. It's no longer about whether they like you or whether you're being too sensitive. It's about whether behavior aligns with institutional standards that everyone agreed to. This limits their maneuverability. They can't dismiss institutional policy the way they can dismiss your feelings. They can't claim you're misinterpreting institutional rules the way they can claim you're misinterpreting their intentions. The policy is written down. It's explicit. It applies to everyone. And you're simply holding them accountable to it. This technique works best in formal organizational contexts where policies actually exist and have enforcement mechanisms. If you're going to reference policy, know the policy. Quote it accurately. Understand what it says and doesn't say. And be prepared for the possibility that they'll still violate it. Policy doesn't prevent bad behavior. It just gives you a documented standard to point to when escalating becomes necessary. Trick 42. Audience awareness exploitation. You've noticed something. They're only disrespectful when you're alone. In meetings with others present, they're professional. In one-on-one conversations, they're demeaning. This isn't random. This is strategic, whether conscious or not. Problematic behavior that only occurs in private tells you something. They know it's inappropriate. They're controlling for witnesses because they don't want to be accountable for what they're doing. Audience awareness exploitation means you ensure future conversations happen with appropriate witnesses present or through documented channels. I'd like to discuss this, but let's include relevant person so we're all on the same page. Or, let's handle this via email so we both have a record of the discussion. Or, I'm going to ask colleague to join us for this conversation. You don't need to explain why. You don't need to accuse them of anything. You simply change the conditions under which you'll engage. Most people will adjust their behavior when others are present. The disrespect diminishes or disappears because they're managing their image. This alone might solve your immediate problem. You get respectful treatment in witness contexts. But if they resist having witnesses present, if they insist conversations must be private, if they refuse to communicate via documented channels, that resistance itself is information. They need privacy to behave the way they're behaving. They're aware their behavior won't hold up to scrutiny. At that point, you have a choice. You can decline private conversations. I'm not comfortable meeting one-on-one anymore. If you need to discuss something with me, let's include appropriate person. They might accuse you of being difficult or making things complicated. That's fine. Complicated is better than unsafe. Protection is more important than their convenience. Bring witnesses. Use documented channels. Change the conditions. Their behavior will either improve or their true nature will become visible to others. Either outcome is better than continuing to absorb disrespect in isolation. Trick 43. Resource control identification. When you're in an asymmetric power relationship, it's easy to feel completely powerless. They have authority over you. They control resources you need. The hierarchy is real and it constrains you. But power is relational and contextual. It's never absolute. Even in unequal relationships, you have more leverage than you think. You just haven't identified it yet. Resource control identification means mapping what you control that creates mutual interdependence. What do they need from you? What would become difficult for them if you withdrew cooperation, knowledge, skill, or access? Maybe you have institutional knowledge they depend on. Maybe you have relationships with clients or stakeholders they need access to. Maybe you have technical skills that would be hard to replace. Maybe you have information about systems or processes that only you understand fully. Maybe your cooperation makes their job easier, and your non-cooperation would create visible problems. Maybe you do work that technically isn't your responsibility but that you've absorbed, and if you stopped, gaps would appear. Make a list. What do they need from you? Not what you wish they needed, what they actually need. What would be harder for them without your willing participation? This isn't about withholding necessary work or sabotaging systems. It's about recognizing your value and understanding that value creates negotiating position. When you understand what you bring, when you see the mutual interdependence clearly, your sense of powerlessness shifts. You're not without leverage. You've just been underestimating what you have. This awareness changes how you navigate the relationship. You're not supplicating. You're not desperate. You're a participant in an exchange where both parties bring something to the table. And exchanges can be renegotiated. You might never explicitly invoke this leverage. Often you don't need to. Just knowing it exists changes your bearing, your confidence, your willingness to set boundaries. And they sense that shift, even if they can't articulate what changed. Trick 44. The formal escalation. You've tried direct conversation. You've set boundaries. You've documented patterns. The disrespect continues. It's time to use institutional grievance procedures. Formal escalation isn't failure. It's recognition that this situation requires intervention beyond what you can accomplish through direct interaction. It's invoking the organizational accountability systems that exist for exactly this purpose. Every organization has a structure, chain of command, HR processes, ombudsperson systems, formal complaint procedures. Know yours. Understand the steps, the documentation required, the timelines involved. When you escalate, you follow the appropriate path. If you skip steps, if you go directly to the CEO when you should have talked to your supervisor first, you undermine your credibility. The process matters. Follow it. Present your documentation. Dates, times, specific behaviors, previous attempts to address directly, patterns over time. Factual, not emotional. On these dates, these things occurred. Here's the documentation. Here's what I've tried. Here's what I'm requesting. The formal escalation signals seriousness. It creates an official record. It invokes organizational accountability in ways that informal conversations don't. Now others have responsibility to respond. They can't ignore it the way they can ignore your personal discomfort. Some things to understand. Escalation has costs. It may make the situation worse before it gets better. It may damage the relationship permanently. It may create political complications you didn't anticipate. You need to be prepared for those possibilities. But sometimes escalation is necessary. When direct intervention has failed, when the behavior continues or worsens, when you're being harmed and nothing else has worked, you use the systems that exist. This doesn't guarantee the outcome you want. Organizations protect their own interests, not always yours. But it establishes a record. It demonstrates you took action. And it removes the problem from the purely interpersonal level into the institutional level where different rules apply. Trick 45. Strategic alliance formation. Isolation enables abuse. Community provides protection. This is true across contexts, personal relationships, workplaces, institutions. When you're alone, you're vulnerable. When you have allies, you have strength. Strategic alliance formation means proactively building relationships with others who can provide support, witness, verification, or intervention. You're not waiting until you're in crisis to discover who your allies are. You're cultivating relationships now. In workplace contexts, this means building relationships across organizational levels. Not just peers, but people above you, below you, in different departments. People who see your work. People who know your character. People who will verify your account if it's ever questioned. This isn't manipulation. It's not fake friendship. It's genuine connection with people while being aware that those connections may serve protective purposes if needed. When disrespect occurs, when someone tries to undermine you or misrepresent what happened, your network becomes crucial. Others can say, "That's not consistent with the person I know." Others can say, "I witnessed that interaction and here's what I observed." Others can provide context or counter-narrative. Strategic alliances also provide reality testing. When you're being gaslit, when someone is telling you that your perception is wrong, when you start doubting your own experience, your allies can confirm, "No, what you're describing matches what I've seen too." They keep you grounded in reality. Some of these alliances will be with people in positions of influence who can intervene if necessary. A mentor who has institutional standing. A senior colleague who has credibility. Someone whose word carries weight when they say, "We need to look at this situation." Build these relationships before you need them. Offer support to others. Show up. Be reliable. Create genuine connections. Because when the time comes that you need your network, you want people who are invested in your well-being, not just casual acquaintances. Trick 46. Institutional memory building. Gaslighting works when there's no record. Historical revision works when documentation doesn't exist. Someone can claim a conversation went differently, that they never said what they said, that you're misremembering or exaggerating, and without a record, it becomes your word against theirs. Institutional memory building means ensuring your version of events is documented in multiple locations and formats. You're creating a record that survives beyond individual memory, that can be referenced later, that establishes what actually happened. Immediately after significant disrespectful incidents, email yourself a detailed account. Date, time, location, who was present, what was said, as close to verbatim as you can remember. What you observed, how you responded, what happened next. Write it while it's fresh, before memory starts reconstructing. Save all communications. Emails, texts, Slack messages, voicemails. Don't delete things because they're uncomfortable. Uncomfortable communications may be the most important documentation you have. Create contemporaneous written records. If something happens in a phone call, send a follow-up email summarizing, "Just to confirm my understanding of our call today." If something happens in person, document it in writing immediately after. Store these records in multiple places. Your personal email, not just work email. A cloud drive they don't have access to. Physical copies if it's particularly important. Redundancy protects against loss or deletion. This feels paranoid. It feels like you're preparing for litigation. Maybe you are, or maybe you're just protecting yourself from someone who has shown they'll rewrite history when it suits them. Institutional memory building works because it establishes facts. When they claim something didn't happen, You have the email from that day documenting it. When they say you never raised the issue, you have the record of when you did. When they characterize events differently, you have your contemporaneous account. Documentation doesn't guarantee justice, but lack of documentation guarantees vulnerability. Create the record. Protect your reality. Future you may need what present you is preserving. Trick 47. Power distance reduction tactics. Some people use hierarchy to enforce deference. They expect you to be deferential, supplicating, diminished in their presence because they hold higher organizational status. And this expectation itself becomes a tool of disrespect. They dismiss you because you're beneath them in the structure. Power distance reduction tactics involve deliberately reducing the symbolic power distance between you. You're not challenging the actual hierarchy. You still report to them. They still have decision-making authority. But you're refusing to perform the deference they expect. This draws on Geert Hofstede's cultural dimension work, power distance being the extent to which less powerful members expect and accept unequal power distribution. In high-power distance cultures or relationships, the hierarchy is maintained through rigid behavioral protocols. In low-power distance contexts, hierarchy exists, but the symbolic distance is smaller. You can choose to reduce symbolic distance even when actual power difference remains. Use their first name if that's appropriate in your organizational context. Not their title, not sir or ma'am. Their name. This equalizes the relational field slightly. Maintain steady eye contact. Don't avert your gaze in supplication. Look at them the way you'd look at a colleague, not the way you'd look at royalty. Speak in an equal tone. Not aggressive, but not deferential either. Level. Direct. The way peers speak to peers. Take up appropriate space. Don't make yourself small. Sit upright. Stand at full height. Occupy the space your body requires without apologizing for it. What you're communicating through these tactics is, I recognize the hierarchy, but I won't perform subordination beyond what's structurally necessary. We're both humans having a conversation. The organizational structure doesn't require me to diminish myself. Some people respond well to this. The symbolic distance was creating awkwardness anyway, and they appreciate the more natural interaction. Others respond poorly. They experience your refusal to perform deference as insubordination. At that point, you have information about how much of their power depends on your willing participation in symbolic subordination. Use these tactics carefully. Know your organizational culture. Know the risks. But also know that you have the right to maintain dignity even within hierarchical structures. Trick 48. Exit planning. You've tried everything. The disrespect continues. The organization tolerates or enables it. The situation is systemic, not individual. And you're starting to realize this environment may not be salvageable. Exit planning is developing a concrete plan for removing yourself from a systemically disrespectful environment. And the planning itself, even if you never execute it, changes your negotiating position and your psychological state. Start practical. Update your resume. Not later, now. Update your LinkedIn profile. Make it current, complete, compelling. Explore opportunities. Even if you're not ready to leave, look at what else exists. Talk to recruiters. Browse job boards. Understand what options you have, what you're qualified for, what's available. Strengthen your financial position. Build savings if possible. Reduce expenses where you can. Create the cushion that makes leaving feasible. Document your accomplishments. Collect examples of your work. Get copies of positive reviews, successful projects, anything that demonstrates your value to future employers. Build external relationships. Connect with people in your field outside your current organization. Join professional groups. Attend industry events. Create a network that exists independent of your current situation. Here's the paradoxical effect. Knowing you can leave changes how you navigate staying. You're no longer desperate. You're no longer trapped. You have options. And that knowledge affects everything. Your willingness to set boundaries, your confidence in interactions, your tolerance for unacceptable behavior. When you know you can leave, you stop making decisions from fear. You make them from choice. I'm choosing to stay for now because it serves my goals, but I could leave if that changed. That's a different position than I have to endure this because I have no alternatives. You might never leave. The situation might improve. The planning might be precautionary, like insurance you never use. Or you might leave. And when you do, you'll be prepared. You'll have runway. You'll have options. You'll have documented value to take with you. Either way, exit planning serves you. It removes the desperation that enables exploitation. It establishes that you have agency, that you're here by choice, that disrespect has consequences, including the consequence that competent people choose to work elsewhere. Plan your exit. Whether you use it or not, having the plan changes everything. Trick 49, Affect labeling. You're flooded. The emotion is overwhelming, consuming. It's taken over your body and your thoughts, and you can't think your way out because thinking is barely accessible right now. This is when affect labeling becomes your most immediate tool. Matthew Lieberman's fMRI research revealed something remarkable. The simple act of naming an emotion reduces amygdala activation. Language itself is regulatory. When you label what you're feeling, you engage your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain capable of observation and reasoning. This engagement creates distance from the raw emotional experience. You're no longer fully immersed in the emotion. You're also observing it. The technique is almost absurdly simple. Silently or aloud, name what you're feeling. I'm feeling anger. This is humiliation. I'm experiencing shame. Not, I am angry. That's fusion with the emotion. I'm feeling anger. That's observation of the emotion. The distinction matters. You don't need to do anything else with it. You don't need to understand why you're feeling it, or judge whether you should be feeling it, or figure out how to make it go away. Just name it. The naming itself creates regulation. Your amygdala activity decreases measurably. The emotion doesn't disappear, but its intensity reduces. You gain a small degree of separation, just enough space to function again. Use this during the emotional surge, in the moment when the feeling is most intense. When you're in the bathroom after the disrespectful interaction, when you're sitting in your car, when you're lying in bed unable to sleep, name what you're feeling. The labels don't need to be sophisticated. Hurt, rage, fear, whatever word captures the core of what's happening. Say it. Feel the slight shift that occurs when language touches emotion. Trick 50, Opposite action. You're stuck. The emotion has settled into a pattern, and now it's directing your behavior in ways that aren't helping. You want to isolate, to ruminate, to retaliate. These urges feel compelling, but some part of you knows, that following them will make things worse. This is when Marsha Linehan's opposite action technique becomes essential. It's a DBT skill based on a simple insight. Sometimes the urge that comes with an emotion is exactly wrong for the situation. And when that's true, doing the opposite changes the emotional state itself. This is behavior-first regulation. When top-down cognitive approaches fail, when you can't think yourself into a different feeling, you act your way there instead. The urge is to isolate. Your emotion is telling you to be alone, to avoid people, to withdraw. But you recognize this isolation will deepen the pain. So you do the opposite. You reach out. You text a friend. You go to a public space. You engage with other humans even though every part of you wants to hide. The urge is to ruminate. Your mind wants to replay the incident endlessly, to analyze every word, to imagine revenge scenarios. But you recognize this rumination is feeding the distress. So you do the opposite. You engage in an absorbing activity. Something that requires enough attention that your mind can't simultaneously ruminate. A complex puzzle, a demanding physical task, a conversation that requires focus. The urge is to retaliate. You want to hurt them back, to say something cutting, to make them feel what they made you feel. But you recognize retaliation will escalate the situation and leave you feeling worse about yourself. So you do the opposite. You do something kind for yourself. You take a bath. You make your favorite meal. You watch something that comforts you. This isn't suppression. You're not denying the emotion. You're changing the behavior that the emotion is urging you toward because that behavior doesn't serve you right now. And here's what happens. The emotion itself begins to shift. Not immediately, but within minutes to hours. By changing the behavior, you interrupt the feedback loop that maintains the emotional state. Use this when you're stuck in an unproductive emotional state after disrespect. When the emotion has outlived its usefulness but won't release you. Act opposite to the urge. Let the behavior lead the emotion toward a different place. Conclusion. Disrespect will come. That's not the question. The question is, will you have the tools to meet it with clarity, strength, and dignity? You now have 50 techniques, from the physiological sigh that resets your nervous system in seconds, to boundary-setting formulas that leave no room for ambiguity, to exit scripts that preserve your dignity when conversations turn toxic. These aren't just concepts. They're precise interventions you can use tomorrow, next week, in the next moment someone crosses a line. Remember this: protecting your peace isn't aggression. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Walking away isn't weakness. These are acts of self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation everything else is built on. So here's my challenge to you. Pick 3 techniques from today that resonated most. Write them down. Practice them. Make them yours. Because the next time disrespect shows up, and it will, you'll be ready. If this video added value to your life, hit that like button and subscribe for more psychology-backed strategies. Drop a comment telling me which technique you're implementing first. I read every single one. Until next time, protect your peace, hold your boundaries, and remember, you deserve respect, and you have every right to require it.